Hey friends, RevDMQ here. I hope you are all well today. I wanted to make a quick video about an incredibly important issue and what seems to be a pressing issue in the gaming industry. The thing I'm going to talk about today, it's not new. It really isn't new, but it seems like we should have moved a little bit further along than we have. And the issue that I need to discuss today is the rampant racism and sexism within the gaming industry and the need for representation in our video games for minorities, for people of color, and for women. I didn't feel like this would be a necessary video to make, but in the last few weeks, it's become incredibly obvious that this is a conversation we need to be having. There were a couple tweets that I saw from Flackfire and from Westy, and Flackfire tweeted, "Me, look at these cool weapons coming and turning tides. Battlefield 1 subreddit. Too many black people. What is life?" And then Westy tweeted, "It's so satisfying to see all the racist, sexist comments about Battlefield 1 being caught in my spam filter." Now that's awesome. But then this guy responds to Westy. And this is what bugs me so much. This dude responds to Westy and says, "As a white male, I don't want to play as any other race. I'm sure there are other races who feel the same way." Now, I've hidden this dude's identity because he's only 17, but this is a big problem in the gaming industry. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. Why do we have a problem if there are African Americans, if there are Africans, if there are Middle Easterners in our video games? Why do we have a problem if there are women in our video games? It doesn't make sense to me. And I feel like we need to talk about it. But first, I need to tell you that if it's not incredibly obvious by my voice, I am a WASP. I'm a white dude. I am a white, affluent, schooled person. I am. And I have incredible privilege because of that. And that's why I feel like it's incredibly important to make this video, because I feel like we who have this privilege need to be advocates for those who have begun perhaps a little bit farther behind because of the racism or the sexism or the bigotry that's present in so many of our societies. And as I said, this is not a new issue. I remember in previous iterations of the Battlefield franchise, people would get frustrated when black people would show up in the game, or when Call of Duty first introduced women into the game, people were pissed off. And I don't get that. I think it's really important that we have people of color and women in our video games. And there's a few reasons why. First of all, if you're going to have a AAA game like Battlefield that's going to cover historical events, if you're going to cover an historical war, then you should probably include people of color and women. I did my own history. I have a degree in history. I have a bachelor's degree in history, and so I did some research. But guess what? My research was not that extensive. Do you know where I went to get some information? Wikipedia. You can go to Wikipedia to learn about the history of black people and women in historical wars. And the first is, there is not a single war in the United States of America that has no minority representation. So all these people that are causing a fuss about the fact that there might be black people in a video game in a war that was fought by white people, I want to say that's bullcrap. That's just flat out not true. You can go to a Wikipedia page that's linked below that is titled Military History of African Americans. And where does the first thing take you? The first link takes you to the Revolutionary War. African Americans fought in the American Revolution, the very first war of our history. And they fought in the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War. They fought in the Civil War. They were in the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, etc., etc. African Americans have fought in every single war in American history. You don't have to look any farther than Hamilton to see, to kind of get a history lesson, the play Hamilton. Watch it, listen to it, to hear about the African Americans who fought, believing that if the colonies won this war, that these formerly enslaved people would be set free. And unfortunately, how wrong they were. And it took way too long for slavery to be ended in the United States. But African Americans have fought in every single war To not have them represented in the game would be historically inaccurate. And then if we're going to talk about global conflicts, I mean, what global conflict does not have people of other races represented? That's a global conflict. I mean, this guy that says, as a white male, I don't want to play as any other race. I want to say to this dude, how stupid. So in Battlefield 1, when you spawn in as the Ottoman Empire, do you automatically switch teams? Do you quit the server because you might be a person of color? That doesn't make any sense. It's historically accurate to have people of color in these video games. And it's also historically accurate to have females in these video games. Now, people that are causing a fuss about the fact that there are women in Battlefield 1 now, the EA and the Battlefield franchise have done incredible work to see where women were represented. And right now, as far as I know, the only kit that has a woman is a Russian sniper. And that's because, historically, there was the Women's Battalion of Death in the Russian military. So they made a decision to represent women in the Battlefield franchise in a way that is representative of actual history. If they did not include women at all, they would not be showing the real history of World War I. Now, were women a majority population in the war? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But they fought, and they fought in an incredible way, and you can read all about the Women's Battalion of Death in World War I and its incredibly significant history. So, these people that are causing a fuss about the history of black people or women or minorities in these video games and how they shouldn't be represented, I want to say that's just wrong historically. It's inaccurate to not have these races represented and not have these people groups represented. But I think it's even more than that. It's not even just about the historical accuracy, because truth be told, I think it's important to have people of color and women and minorities represented in our video games, even if it's historically inaccurate. And the reason is representation really matters. Seeing people like you on screen is really, really, really important. And now linked below is an article by Huffington Post. And the Huffington Post has this article titled, "Why On-Screen Representation Actually Matters." And you need to read the whole thing in its entirety. On-screen representation actually matters for a plethora of reasons. And one of the things that this article says is that for the underrepresented, seeing a character who looks like them can have a limiting effect if that character is restricted to behaving only in certain ways, which don't reflect the breadth of their life's experience. If you are a Black, Asian, or Latino person who sees an inauthentic or one-dimensional version of yourself, you may wonder if that is all is expected of you in society. And it talks about how these stereotypical character tropes have a lasting impression on people of color and on minorities. If that's how you're being perceived socially within the broader context of our culture, then maybe that's how people are viewing you on any given day. So the fact is, we need to have women and we need to have people of color in our video games. It's kind of like when you see your high school or your alma mater on the news or represented in a movie or something. You see this thing that you have been a part of and you get excited. There's this pride and there's this ownership associated with, hey, that's my school. Those are my people. I went there. It's like that, only it's significantly greater when it's, hey, people of my color are being represented in a diverse and complex and faithful way. Or, hey, women are being represented in such a strong and non-stereotypical way. Maybe I can be like that too. And the effect that it has on young people is significant. When you see someone that looks like you, when you see someone that talks like you, when you see someone who has your gender or your accent or speaking your language in a video game, you begin to look at yourself a little bit differently. You begin to shift how you view yourself. And you begin to think that you are not limited to the tropes that our media has limited you to. And one of the things that I think is really cool is in the game Fortnite, you are almost guaranteed to play as a minority or a woman at some point if you're playing the PvP. You just spawn in as a random character and you're often a woman or a person of color And what's remarkable to me is that when you're playing Fortnite and you and your teammates see somebody off in the distance, or you get a kill or whatever, your language shifts. So most of the time we use the male pronoun when we're playing video games. We'll say, oh, he's over here. He's at 230. He's behind the house. He's behind the tree. But when you're playing Fortnite and you're up against a female opponent, more often than not, people are saying, oh, she's over there. She's behind the tree. She's down the hill. She's due north. And that matters. Changing your language is incredibly important. The fact is, women and people of color have been playing video games as white men for years. Now, I think having this actual representation will help us to see that the gaming community is way broader and way more diverse than so many of our video games have let us think. And so when we start talking about people, when we say she, or when we see people of color in our video games, our imagination begins to expand a bit. Video games and media, they have this way of telling stories and of opening our imagination and changing how we perceive reality. And if people of color and women are reduced to these character tropes, if they're reduced to marginalized characters in our stories, or if they're absent completely, that shapes how we perceive them and view them in our world. And so when we need representation in our video games, and I'm very thankful for games like Battlefield and like Fortnite for including people of color and women in their games in integral ways, and not reducing them to the margins of the game. If I could put my pastor hat on a little bit here, I'm a full-time pastor. And the truth is, many, many, many who are putting forth this racism and sexism within the gaming industry would identify like me as being a white Christian man. And I've got to say, as a pastor, this is absolutely inappropriate. We cannot call ourselves a Christian and spew forth this hatred towards people who might look differently than us or think differently than us that is fundamentally opposed to the way that we have claimed to live our lives. And so I'm thankful that we have companies that are taking the lead in the gaming industry on including people of color and women. My hope is that we will begin to shift our imagination and that we will see less and less comments like this 17-year-old kid who only wants to play as a white dude. Because the truth is, when we play video games, when we step into the eyes and the person of this character in this video game, we see the world a little bit differently than we did before. Friends, what do you think about representation in the gaming industry? Do you think there's enough? Do you think we need more? How do you think it should be implemented? Leave me a comment below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. Share this video on social media if you think it's an important matter. And I will catch you in the next one.